do not understand what that means. So because there is a condition of social death does not mean that it forecloses. Because there's resistance in that social death does not mean that social death.
But why does that mean social death is
Because
productive?
like your misunderstanding of Afro-pessimism is very evident. Afro-pessimism is not a dismissal of resistance. We actually find resistance within our situation.
That's what the
So why is it
about
resistance within your situation and the resistance that we advocate? Why are they?
Because those are entirely different structural positions.
Right, but we obviously can't resist in the same way as you.
Right.
So what do white people do to resist white supremacy, or what can we do?
Fuck the government.
Excuse me, my cross-sex. Reject the app. 2, your sex and evidence in the
What do
context.
white people do? That was my question.
Say fuck the government, just like black people. Why the evidence says, white people have to like find liberty within themselves, but black people can only find liberty within other black people.
Okay.
There's no reason why a white person can't say the government is bad just because they benefit.
But that doesn't mean you get access to the implementation because your 1AC has started from the position of that being good.
Okay, well, this lawyer evidence says that the government is bad and making bad policies. So does your sort of
not read that card fully then, because it's very specific about how we think about the uniqueness of your affirmative. Drone violence is not unique. It's
right,
not
drone violence may not be unique, but there's an elite white drone culture.
Yeah, but you don't
why
solve that.
Why?
Because
this card is not talk about drone wars.
Go back to the first cross-sex. You know what I'm saying? When he
literally said,
I'm explaining it to you. He literally said, you know what I'm saying, no, they curtail drone strikes. He don't say that they stop. He said they curtail drone strikes.
Right.
That
so
is not
the
get rid of that drone
is no drones.
There is no alternative.
Right, but theoretically, you'd be happier with the world.
We don't
So your position, there's no hope.
In the world, no.
But theoretically, that means that you would prefer there to be no drones, but you accept that that is not.
We really don't appreciate you trying to theoretically craft our arguments. Our argument is that we have no hope in the way in which the system is structured, and that within the system we can change our situation. There's no hope, none.
Okay.
I do apologize.
So, if society can multiply racism, isn't that a reason why creating laws to prevent that
No,
would be
because
beneficial?
the law itself is structurally anti-black.
Tell me how it is.
The TED evidence is the reason as to why.
Right, but that isn't predictive of ways that we can change the law.
No.
Every way in which we've said we've changed the law has only further reinforced.
The example of this is like things like the civil rights movement, in which we have generated the hope that law can fix things, but you can just displace those things. Violence is not replacement. That's why you can never solve through those institutions.
You didn't read the card you jumped us, right?
No, sorry about that.
It's good.
You need this.
Alright. Alright. See, my people have been forced silent. Through oppressive coercion and gratuitous violence, they have been tricked to believe that they are minds. But societal cruise control is for the spineless, not the lions, who reside in safaris of concrete, steel, and iron. But they don't give a damn how we feel, so instead of a spill, we get the iron and start finding. That's a story too common. Shell still hot and the first tear dropped from loved ones crying. See, statistically, I should have made it past 23. So I'm either possibly an anomaly or these white folk been lying. They want to say work harder, you'll make it like we ain't trying, but I'm finding this. It's my skin, looks like it was dyed in the mud at the Côte d'Ivoire and shipped to the docks of Baltimore. My melanin is as defined as David Sling and Goliath dying. See, it's written in papyrus that the sons and daughters of Isis and Osiris should be defined. Born between being a nigga and a place where your race dictates how you're treated by the tyrants. I don't call Cain a nigga, I call him my nigga to build our alliance, and alliance to the defining where prophets speak of perfect prophecies and G's transverse time to retrieve our niggas lost, we should clack clack ride and define. Now I feel like Nat Turner with a burner, Malcolm X in a Teflon vest define. I feel like Megan Evans with a Beretta, Fred Hampton with a Mac 11 and 2 AK-47s with barrels the size cannons define. Now if those black souls had survived, if they were a little more strapped. Although I agree with the latter, it don't matter. I'm the time machine about to bring those black souls back for guidance. See, the mind and the body may die. It's the soul of the revolutionary that's timeless. So we don't truly die with revolutionary suicide. Their essence resides within our defiance. Now the defiance is important because when they get up here and say shit like, oh, well, you know, we can kind of look past all the other fucked up shit the government done for this one good instance. That's the reason why they lose right there. That's nothing but an example of how their white privilege has epistemologically blinded them to the fucked up shit that the government repeatedly does on a daily basis. We don't need to come into a debate to talk about impacts to know the fucked up shit the government does. When I go back home, I see that the fucked up shit the government does on a daily basis. You know what I'm saying? Like, how many of their siblings are felons? How many of their siblings been locked up just for being who they are? How many times have they been walking around and got stopped by the police just because they was black? You know what I'm saying? Like, how many times have they been in court and had the judge look at them like they was less than? You know what I mean? How many times have they had to sit there and go visit their siblings in prison, their people in prison? You know what I mean? That blinds them from being able to see how the government is, like, how the government, can't work. It don't work. Now, they attempt to use framework as a way to shy away from this shit, right? They say, well, you know, we can evaluate our impacts in this way, but that's bullshit. They want you to use your white privilege as a way to say, hey, it works for us sometimes, so that's good enough. They literally make the argument that good is good enough, but then let's take that a step further. Good is good enough for who? Well, good enough for white people, because that's the only people who continuously benefit from legislation. They don't win if any of their arguments are good. They lose because they said that shit. Legal discourse, as articulated by Tibbs, Harvey and Moten, Farley, and Sexton, is the problem. It's the way in which fugitive slave laws then became stop and frisk policies. How Jim Crow became white flight. You know what I'm saying? Whenever we implement any type of laws to try to change our situation, all it does is reinscribe itself in a different form.
Which is even true in the context of more power says that's how Obama's been getting away with that shit.
Man, and this also isn't a solvency deficit. Our argument is a whole reason why the negative is more of a disad to the affirmative. There's nothing good that comes out this. You know what I'm saying? Like all the bad shit that let's use some impact calculus. All the bad shit that the government does, you know what I'm saying? This outweighs the benefit of kind of curtailing the use of drone strikes. You know what I'm saying? Like the people that die on a daily basis because of state-based oppression outweighs curtailing drone strikes. They try to make the argument that future-based politics is good, but that's bullshit. Like none of these politics work. Like they never say anything about the Farley evidence that says all this shit must go. The slave perfects itself when it bows down to its masters and asks for legitimacy. The slave perfects itself when it gets on its knees and say, "Please fix our situation." You know what I'm saying? We can clearly see that fixing our situation only benefits them in a manner in which they say, "Hey, we helped." But then we look at our situation and shit ain't saying. You know what I'm saying? They can say that the Emancipation Proclamation was legislation that got rid of slavery. But yet, our niggas is still locked up in prison with the prison industrial complex, repeatedly benefiting off of them making 25 cents a day, making solar panels and shit like that.
Bullshit.
Like, how is that not slavery? There are no redeemable qualities of government. None. There's no way that their attempt to curtail the use of drone strikes as a way to say that, hey, negative. This is an attempt of negative state action. Doesn't actually. They don't even stop drone strikes. They don't change the way they don't change the whole stuff. Huh?
Whole stuff.
What about it? Like shit like that. Like all that coal emissions. Like all that shit. Like they don't stop it. You know what I'm saying? In cross-sex, remember, he said they curtail drone strikes. They don't change who they strike. They don't change who they target. All they do is say that Obama has to go to the courts, and then the courts have to decide. We already know the courts are racist, which means that when Obama goes to the courts will have no problem aiming at a black or brown body. The courts have no problem blowing up a community in Afghanistan and Iraq. They ain't got no problem doing that. They've been doing. So how do they stop that violence? You know what I'm saying? U.S. hegemony is bullshit. U.S. hegemony is black. U.S. hegemony is social death for the black body. U.S. hegemony is what keeps us in our what keeps us in our current situation. So you have to reject the affirmative and say fuck this whole shit. It don't work. Black and brown bodies will always be subjugated within the system.
551. Yeah, I'm gonna run it back.
Is anybody checking any scores? Yeah, I don't know what time the TCU game started, but well, we play TCU today, so it's
Won't be until after 1 o'clock Eastern, so.
okay.
Do you all have a number of this change?
Yes, sir. We got that.
The game starts at 7 o'clock Eastern.
The TCU game? Oh, we may be done about it before we finish it. Bring it to see.
There's the second half, yeah.
So
About to catch the second half.
second half, then we missed the Chiefs game too.
I think I just jumped to the wrong thing. I don't know.
No, but I got it.
It's not the mirror. Should be my OUBC.
That's the old team. That's the old
No, that's still.
UBC.
Who changed it to CB?
That changed.
We went back to
It's just alphabet. It's fine. It's something. If it would make you happier, handle.
Even this whole entire is never happy.
Fair enough.
You guys think?
Yeah.
Sweet.
You just need a refresher.
Okay. Is anyone ready? Awesome.
We should be able to get to where the case prevents Mooney. 9 minutes in the 1AC. It's key test viability, integrity, the all the real world versus the plan that generates the implementation, education, the devils, and the details, only including those discussions in specific policy solves. They can see the entirety of the framework of debate are longer in the same case, which I debate is key deliberation, critical thinking skills, which are portable skills and can be used in our own lives to confront structural violence. That's longer in our style of debate is a prerequisite to any solvency and getting out of around skills to be able to challenge racism and whiteness and status quo, which means the weighing of the affirmative, the inaction of policy, and the which find debate is a prerequisite to gaining skills necessary to solve their violence consent across the permutation. You should choose to vote affirmative, restrict the presence of war powers authority, and also acknowledge that the state and USFG may be hopeless in other instances. Obviously solves the entirety of the negative offense because we can reject the state in other instances. Then they plan don't allow the perfect to be the good of the enemy of the good. Any small solvency deficit is far outweighed by the net benefit of the affirmative, which is key to set a global precedent for drone use, which is solves miscalculation war. The Southeast China Seas that escalates global nuclear war land. That's the land the answer for the morning sea fairness. Garners the United States States sky credibility, which sustains U.S. hegemony, and also going to be able to solve global warming. They concede warming is an existential risk to the affirmative is the only way to reduce it. Hedge to resolve their impacts are leaving evidence indicates that it causes crackdowns in the area of imperialist interventions, which obviously makes racism all about worse than existing status quo. He makes a lot of link arguments that it's not severance, the permutation is not severance, so we just reject the state in all other instances, which solves their relevance. We still advocate the affirmative being implemented. They say the more policy making and link evidence. It does not say we should not have faith in the state in any instances. It obviously does not assume the plan. They say politics is necessarily fine. Our McLean evidence is impact to that. I'll get to that later. Well, they say hedge is bad, and he reads this on Rodriguez evidence however constructing prior questions doesn't disprove the affirmative or reject their generalizations. Owens to epistemology ontology often seeks to philosophical terms such not be a danger to the mid tendency prioritization of ontology and epistemology over explanatory powers on a wholly dependent ontology and epistemology is no longer the major wholly dependent philosophical means to cultivate driven theory around the proper driven approach to challenge society which is most apt that slips in the average student generally of empirically sure the idea can only be theoretical pressure which gets right feedback in the potential where so ridiculous size their structural violence doesn't escalate in Vulcan and Tachicate that just not mean aggression of the anger needed to receive aggression some agreed conflicts present between individuals relations to state being concerned with the private factors of conflict escalating the violence basis of individual aggressions are very different than those involved in factoring of influence and bombing rappers pushing the environmental violence as multiple violence has multiple causes obviously proves that hedge doesn't escalate. Hedge has led to the lowest level of violence in history. That's our burn evidence. Obviously results a lot of their impacts is domestic. His argument about domestic charging of people using drones is not based in any evidence. It's just that their assertions. There's even in cross-checks when I asked them if the person was actually killed by a drone strike, what didn't happen. It was empirically disproven that person was killed by law enforcement officials, which proves the plan would necessarily not be any more racist than the status quo. The drone corps would be able to solve sufficiency is sufficiently, even if there's a trade-off to killing more Iraqi bodies, it sets the precedent in which people solve the affirmative advantage. So that's what Johnson McCaffrey evidence and Zanko evidence indicates the plan would be sufficient to solve, extend across the fear and when evidence of rejecting and lack of an alternative and focuses on a method that leads to political paralysis. We'll never get answers to any of their questions and never return to action, even if they win the alternative is a prerequisite to action. You don't know what that action looks like. You don't know if that action is going to be successful, which means you should default to working within the political system. I'll get to that later on. That's fear and evidence now going to default consequences or Isaac evidence indicates that their interpretation leads to moral tunnel vision. The pursuit of good can often have evil consequences away. The absence of prerequisite testing, y'all use you tell shall we are forced to make decisions uncertain you attend risk of extinction medley greater than any other risk that every risk of containing the formula of extinction which have their frames so low. The risk of extinction may be fractional infinity is still infinity. Now now go to the Berman of state actions against itself solve in the world of the permutation. Their critiques of the permutation are overly pessimistic, fatalistic, and far opposes any potential good action, even if there's not a motive. Even if there's a motive for the state to be racist, it does not mean that restricting the presence of war powers authority to use drones is necessarily racist. Now they're wrong about social death theory. They did not read any new evidence, and then negative will have to respond to our interpretation of theory. Macedo evidence indicates it's always possible for individual disadvantaged bodies to change their relation to the world and change their separation from the world, which obviously proves that working within the system would be sufficient to solve their impact. Our pin evidence indicates the binary opposition they create between whiteness and blackness inevitably results in blackness never being able to result in impossible solutions, which means the alternative is overly fatalistic, doesn't allow for oppressions of resistance, which we will solve the status quo. Raw evidence indicates that they taper over the social resistance exists in the status quo, which proves that resistance can still function in a world in which the state exists, which proves the alternative will solve. Courts would not use racist standards that would be still be able to sufficiently solve. Now, go to our Jensen evidence. Jensen evidence does not go negative from the position of being a white male advocating policy solutions is the best way to engage in the state. Or McLean evidence indicates that rejecting all action ignores the people who have their hands on the levers of power in the status quo. Only learning policy skills and debates can reduce the negative problems of the status quo. They give up any potential deal with the state which overlooks the way it's described in the status quo. The alt or a lack of an alt does nothing to solve it. Even if it's a prerequisite for solving racism, it does not resolve anything. McLean evidence indicates the only way to take the power back from the hands of elites is to learn the policy solutions that exist in the status quo. They concede our fundamental evidence, which indicates focus on nuclear weapons is key to peace movements, which we will solve the terminal impact of war, which means just the representations of the plan or representations of the plan to solve. It's necessary to learn the language of the state to challenge itself. The 95 alcoholics, which only sees show not perceive would be successfully theoretical aspect. There's the residue of the achievement. The transferatory will not be reversed. Culture types include strategy for the vast majority of culture will be understood the world hustle in society. The state that does not actually exist. World also has in the society culture is not enough. That may be necessary and is not sufficient to achieve results. It's necessary to perform certain disciplines or necessary to make certain language before you can say something different. Instead, across our 10 episodes, there's no spillover from this round debate. It's fundamentally a competition, which means if we lose debates, it's not because we thought we were racist, because we thought our strategy was better, that if we made a judging mistake, they could. They concede while warming racist earth thrust evidence indicates it results in more damage, more violence against minorities, which means the affirmative resolves. A key problem.
No, you said this.
I think you had 441.
Was the last word? That's affirmative resolve. What?
Warming.
Warming.
445.
Is that 440 what?
445.
for the affirmative. Everybody ready?
Their arguments about random case in the real world or any reason why their frameworks give does not matter in the world. We're saying the plan is a bad idea because it believes in a narrative of progress and progressive capability in the law to actually solve for violence and anti-blackness. There's zero distinction in the one era as to how establishing a separate court actually limits the scope or the intensity of the violence of drone strikes. It's not a question about how many drone strikes we have or who is targeted, but the fact that drones even exist in the first place. And that sort of violence is generated by a fundamental anti-blackness understanding of criminality that determines how we do this. It's even true in the language of the 1AC in which their impact framing scenarios ultimately talk about the ways in which we can police and manage the ways in which other people of color are able to use and engage in drone strikes. That's the entire point of our Rodriguez evidence, which he actually concedes the internal link argument to, which is that their failure to understand the ways in which domestic policing strategies of how we determine forms of criminality, i.e. black bodies versus white bodies and other people of color, it determines the ways in which we can export those models internationally in terms of how we can be viewed as accountable and effective participants in a particular legal system. It means that we have impact turned the entirety of the 1AC in its decision to participate in policy making. You need to look at your flow and count how many times the affirmative has told you to ignore the gratuitous response to the system because it works for you. That's the impact to our Harvey and Moten efforts, which I don't hear a response to in the 1AR, by the way. But 1AR is the reason why you do not vote for their framework, nor do you vote for the affirmative. It's a reason why they should lose. Okay. Restricting presidential authority only intensifies the violence of the law that structurally anti-black. Any attempt to limit war powers by law is the profession of the violence of slavery from the master of OUBCNeg. That's our Farley evidence from the 1NC, which they have conceded. This is why they lose the debate, because it shift and power generates a narrative of redemption and hope that makes it impossible to acknowledge how that very faith itself makes that violence inevitable. The law can do nothing but culturally lynch and consume black death. It's not a question of curtailing drones, but the fact that white supremacy, war, and people of color is the condition of possibility for that shit to happen in the first place. There's no difference between the act and the peace reports. There is no distinction that is made above. The only option in the act means to refuse the displacement of black suffering, maintains the hegemony of white supremacy, excludes all people covered as political spaces. We are winning a uniqueness argument that is made by our Farley, Harvard, and Moten pieces of evidence, which have been uncontested throughout the entire debate. The myth of progress is destroyed by the violence against the black body, that police murders, mass incarcerations, education segregation are not just high-profile exceptions to the rule of law that we can fix and provide the backdrop for our political debates, but are structurally embedded to the everyday practices and determines who gets the right to participate in those spaces and purpose and who privileges from those discussions. The affirmative is a self-fulfilling prophecy because they are necessary for the law to maintain its ethical coherency because it has to generate its own problems in order to legitimize those institutions and tools as a way to solve for their impacts. You should be entirely skeptical of the affirmative's ability to make any progress or policy. Tell me how they actually do this. That's the entire point of our criticism, that they cannot tell you how from a position of the people that Donald talks about in his speech as how why that is an effective structural way of understanding, an effective way of rejecting the violence of the system itself. That's the way in which anti-blackness structures their choice to place faith in the law is only a violent investment. Yeah, even if they win their anti-blackness arguments, that is not the crux of our argument as to the terms of while using the state and using law is something that we should never, ever view as a productive political option because only all those games are reversible, but it's impossible to have any form of negative state action when the society that you have founded that state upon is fundamentally racist and sexist. That is also the lawyer evidence that they have not answered from coming out of the 1AR, which is a specific impact turn to their focus on drones, that it takes a particular type of privilege to finally feel like you're being threatened when drones are going all over the world, when that type of violence is endemic to the very structure every day. That also answers all of their structural violence arguments because it's not a question of it being able to make a spectacular level of a grandiose extinction claim, because that extinction is something that is internalized and unseen and happens every day, which outweighs all their impact comparison because we are never able to fully understand the scope and violence of the law when we continue to keep this deferring our ethical responsibility of challenging those questions. They say that there's a permutation, but there's no room for a permutation in a world where we don't have it all because we're impact turning the act, and that's all still severance because it requires them to sever out of legal discourse their use of the courts, their use of the law as a mechanism for suggesting political change, and also their faith and hope in these systems that is something that is generated by the violence of anti-blackness. That is our Harvey, Moten, Farley, essentially every piece of evidence that we have in the 1AC makes this argument, and they have not actually answered the internal warrant as to how all the epistemological claims of the affirmative are things that are generated by white supremacy and have been certain privileges towards white people that they are supposed to cash in. You are supposed to cash in your check for whiteness. Yeah. Also, the things that they consider to be good and good enough is also bullshit for people that have been on the reverse end of that violence. That's why you need to flip the gaze and understand the position from the places that we and Dumbo are talking about as the effective ways of changing the ways we understand legal academic debate. That this refusal is functionally key, and that their ability to acknowledge that is bad. Also, none of their anti-blackness necessity alternative makes sense in a world where their sexist evidence is in the context of our Milton evidence, saying that what interests Milton is that blackness can frustrate the policing, i.e. what we have done, that our performance actually does these things, and it's a reason why this is a negative card, not an affirmative card. It's not a reason why we can still work within the state of America, but why the fundamental presence of blackness, the sort of revealing of these experiences, is something that terrorizes the legitimacy of the law, which means that our rejection is a good thing, and the reason why the plan is still a bad idea. Thank you for reading us solvency cards to our particular methodology. Where they say that hedging doesn't disprove the affirmative, but that means they're not listening to our argument that hedging in America is always ethically bad. It always reproduces the same forms of violence, that we cannot have our faith in the law. The permutation cannot resolve these things, and also the permutation is an example of the type of legal shifting that we're talking about. And it's a form of hope. It's a type of illegal shifting that we're talking about in our TIPS evidence, where it can always correct itself, because it's not the permutation turns from perm to both to perm do it in other instances. Also, that it's a hope that you should not have. You have to be skeptical of the affirmative in the ways in which, in the same way that people of color are skeptical, because there's a historical violence that motivates those things. That's why all their ontology arguments don't make sense, because they're not historicized in the context of black body. They're all in the context of people like Foucault and generic IR studies that does not have any link to our arguments.
Anyone not ready? Two ways to evaluate the debate. First, you don't get any of their prior questions argument first. We need the app in order for any fairness to happen in the debate. That's the only way. Or you have to have a chance that they conceded this argument. Second, it results in education and implementation because it's the only way to actually test these arguments. And testing is an internal link into critical thinking skill sets or Lumberg evidence. The only way where we are able to test their arguments and they are able to test ours, or critical thinking skills develop because that clashes what builds those skills, and that results in giving us the tools to fight racism and broader structural problems, which means that our framework is able to solve and internally turn into their arguments, which means all they really go for in the 2 and R is that the plan is bad. That's basically a presumption argument. That means if we win any risk that we're able to do something good, they've considered our advantages, which means 1%. The lowest probability possible that we are able to solve means try or die goes affirmative, because that's all we have to do to prove that we're right. Now he says that we distribute violence and that's a form of blackmail. But our argument is, except our own evidence here, which is that they result in generalizations. They have not disproven the specificity of our arguments, which means even if they want to link specifically to hedge, they have not contested our warming argument. They also have not contested our South China Sea scenario argument, which means that they should point out the specific problems of these arguments, not these overly broad, this is anti-blackness type arguments, which means that we should err toward specificity. They say norms are kind of policing, but it's not a question of the norms policing other countries. It's a question of the standard that the U.S. is setting. It's a criticism of the way the U.S. is deploying drinks. Now, only a drink court's able to check that. They do not have any specific evidence about the carve-out that we do. We establish a court that requires Obama to provide evidence. That's the problem with the status quo. Obama doesn't have to provide evidence, which allows them to indiscriminately kill people around the globe, which means their argument is uniqueness, and the app is a link turn to their drones target people argument. There is an elite culture that allows Obama to get away with this now. The plan is a distancing from that, and is a external check on that, because Obama can no longer just get away with this kind of white privileged drone culture, letting him kill everyone because the drone court is established to check that, which means they don't have any argument that specifically they have. We're able to link turn the only specific argument to drones. Then they say, Norton's argument isn't about the U.S. policing the world. It's a question of the U.S. creating better practices for itself, so with other countries modeling not contested, or specific solvency evidence on this. Also, their causality is just wrong. And then they say hedge is unethical, but we did answer this argument. Our hidden evidence indicates that the structural violence that the Rodriguez evidence is talking about never escalates, which is the reason why you err toward escalation. Now, full concessions of the advantages means it's try or die after. Shell evidence should be a filter for you. Extinction comes first because you can't come back from it, which means that if there's any risk that we solve these arguments, and that's a reason not to be hopeless, which is a reason which proves the permutations go, but it's also a reason who vote affirmative. First is the hedge argument. Extend our O evidence. It indicates that there's a terminal uniqueness problem with their affirmative. Black people may be police, their bodies may be marked, but there's a declining amount of violence happening in the status quo. The world is net better. The reason for that is hegemony, so it's able to prevent great power war, which means even if there's some structural violence, great power war never escalates. And the hidden evidence is the filter for you to say that the escalation of great power war from a collapse of hegemony should come first because it results in extinction. The second is collapse leads to extinction. That's a Barnett evidence results in great power war and nuclear escalation. Our Lehman evidence is a turn to the alternative. Collapse of hedge results in U.S. lash out. That makes imperialism and militarism worse, which triggers all of their impacts. They don't have an answer to this argument, which is the reason why you should vote affirmative. Also, for soft power is key. The plan is able to resolve this argument. It's not the kind of policing hegemony that they're talking about. It's getting other countries to like us because we're not just killing their citizens anymore. The alternative is not able to solve this because it doesn't change our screwed up drone policy, which means they have no access to this argument. Even if they win that the hedge is racist and you should reject it, that it's a just choice argument, any justification is enough for the vote affirmative. Second is our China argument. It outweighs the time frame. You should further the specificity of the escalation of the scenario over the deficit impacts of the South China Sea war escalates and results in great power war leads to extinction. Accountability is key because that's the only way to get China to model the United States. And the United States sets a better precedent. Our evidence is just more specific than theirs. You should prefer the specificity over their overgeneralizations. That's our own evidence, and which means they're not able to solve this. The alternative is not able to solve this because they don't do anything to change the norms that the U.S. is setting. Third is the warming arguments that off branch of soft power. Even if you decide that hedge is bad, soft power is able to build coalitions that are able to prevent warming, which leads to extinction. Try or die. It's existential. They also have not contested the fact that that warming is necessary to be able to check white privilege, because people who espouse that warming is not real are the people who have massive amounts of white privilege that the plan is a counter to that. Stopping global warming destroys their privilege. Also, it means that we stop polluting and screwing over minorities, which is the reason why we are able to access their arguments, and neutralizes their ethics claim, which is the reason why you don't just err negative on that question, but it's also at all costs any reason why you reject, because that makes their arguments inevitable. Now, extended permutation or the way that you should extend fear and evidence, methodological questions never result in action that needs to foreclose potential options. Also, where Isaac's evidence to frame the state are an absolutist approach that forecloses potential opportunities that could be good. You should not say that you should not just rule out one possibility based on ethics. It results in kind of tunnel vision, which means that their absolute stance inevitably results in failure. They are Jensen evidence indicates that white people need some way to resist, otherwise it's inevitable, which means white people can use to say, we're not saying that they need to, which means their sort of resistance is able to solve. You can affirm that method, but you can also affirm that sometimes maybe white people changing the way state policy is structured and is racist could be good, which means that they don't have a specific answer to that. Berman evidence indicates that there's sort of psychology rooted in there's nothing that we can do that can be good, just results in nothing, because why would you bother doing anything? It's not, it doesn't actually result in any kind of action. Or extend our Jensen evidence indicates that we need to be able to challenge the state. Our McLean evidence indicates that dogmatic policymakers are the people who have their hands on the levers of power, only learning the language is able to solve. Our Sullivan evidence indicates that culture is transitory, only grounding our resistance in law can create permanent legal residue that can check escalation within culture, which means any one of these is any 1% of these arguments is a reason to affirm. Now, extend our Bob, and he doesn't bring the word on this jazz flavorful to culture we're able to develop in spite of being socially dead, just proves that you should be pessimistic. Our Penn evidence says that their evidence is too totalizing. They don't take into account different ontological experiences, which is a reason to be skeptical. Also, Reseda evidence, ontological death is wrong. You always have the ability to change these things. These are all reasons why you should be optimistic in the road of the permutations, able to resolve their arguments. You should not, they don't have an answer to these arguments. They just say they don't, they just dismiss them.
Definitely radically different.